Norway is a relatively small country and have a history of having small and local detention facilities located in idyllic nature landscapes and city centers throughout the country, such as Horten Prison and Valdres Prison. However, since the opening of Halden Prison in 2010, we have seen a trend towards developing that Norwegian criminologist Hedda Gjertsen refers to as prison machines. We are building large, standardized prisons which are, according to the government, cost-effective, and we are placing them in rural areas with no natural connection to society around. Today's conversation is about the consequences of this development and the benefits of having smaller detention facilities in more central areas compared to larger prisons in secluded areas. My name is Simon. I'm a former inmate of Eidsberg prison back in 2013 when it was a cozy little brick prison with 16 inmates. And I was an inmate of Oslo prison in 2015 and 16 when it was Norway's largest prison with 430 inmates. There I became involved with Røverradioen, Norwegian prison radio. The last few years I've been working for them with, among other things, moderating debates inside and outside the prison walls. I'm also doing a bachelor's degree in criminology. Our panel today consists of Elli Graf. Elli is the managing director of Elevator, a small-scale facility located in Oslo, housing up to 30 inmates at the end of their sentence. She also has a master's degree in social entrepreneurship and works closely with politicians in the ministries to ensure better conditions for people who are incarcerated. Anna-Sabina Soggiu is a social worker and is currently completing her PhD. She has many years of experience working in municipality agencies, specializing in substance abuse and mental health. Johan Lothe is the managing director of Wayback, an NGO supporting inmates in the process of reintegration. He has many years of experience with the Norwegian prison system, both through his work with reintegration and through his own lived experience. A warm welcome to you all. Johan, how do you think these new prisons correspond to the principles we have in Norway in the Norwegian Correctional Service, like the proximity principle and the principle of normality?
Not at all. They are located too far away from my relatives, my family, my friends. They're also located too far away from the public service, the municipalities, and the people whom I need to cooperate with when I return to the society.
The travel routes to these prisons can be quite problematic as they are located far away from everything. What do you think the consequences of this is, Elli?
Well, to answer your question, just one more sentence about Elevator. As you mentioned, we are located in Oslo, which is an important point, and we are financed by the Norwegian Correctional Service and run by the Salvation Army. And from my experience, I can maybe see more about the value of not being located far from everywhere, because yeah, this is what we experience at Elevator, which are important factors like being able to work or do work training, being close to their relatives and their family, being able to attend programs like Wayback or other NGOs, which are often located in bigger cities. Also being able to start working with their financial situation and nonetheless getting started to get safe housing. And those are all stabilizing factors that we know help prevent new crimes from being committed.
The looks of these new prisons are quite intimidating, with high walls and fences and institutionalized design. What do you think the effects on this is on, for example, children who wants to visit their parent, Anna?
It's quite scary, isn't it? For me as an adult and social worker, the first encounters with prisons was visiting people inside. And it was quite scary for me as a grown-up. All the security you have to go through, leaving your phone, it's kind of a claustrophobic situation, the whole thing. And it's telling you that the people inside these walls are someone you should be scared of. So I can only imagine being the next of kin, the family, and especially being the children of someone inside, and how that makes you feel and how devastating that must be going through those security systems to visit your father or mother, for example. So,
and what about...
It's like the buildings in itself are stigmatizing, I guess.
Mm-hmm. That's the same with bypassers, or maybe even the inmates themselves?
I would think it has the same effect on the self-esteem and how you understand yourself. Who am I if society have to be so careful around me? It's kind of like an ejecting force away from the larger society and inclusion into some sort of out-groups, which we have put inside those walls. And we also know that institutions who, in different fields or similar fields like psychiatric wards or psychiatric institutions has a way of developing their own society inside, like different rules, different cultures, which might also make it harder to be part of what we can call the greater society when you get back outside, I guess.
How easy is it to plan a release from such like the new prisons, maybe like Halden, that's all the way into the forest, Elli?
I don't think it's easy if there's not a step being included in between those kind of prisons and being released. And the very new experience that came to Elli this year is that we now also have female prisoners, and we see that what is not easy for male prisoners is even harder for female prisoners because they're so few. And most of the prisons that are for women, they are located in the southeast of Norway. So for them, sometimes they have to make a very tough decision by having to decide either, do I want to have a good rehabilitation program while I'm doing my sentence, or do I want to keep in touch with my kids? So, yeah.
Johan, what do you think about the plan to release people from these new prisons away?
It's too far away from the society, and when you try to plan your new life in the greater society, you need to be excluded from where you come from. Now I think about the prison where I have been, let's say, for the last couple of years. Another thing is also that I'm then released from a high security prison, which is not good. I need to be transferred to a lower security prison. However, every prison needs to be close to where I live, close to where I need to learn to be a new person. And I can't learn to be a new person out in nowhere. I need to be close to the environment I will be a part of.
One thing is the physical distance, which complicates such things as visits, planning release, and so on. Another thing is how the distance to society affects your mind. We are now going to watch a short video made by Wayback, which demonstrates from an inmate's perspective how it feels like to be newly released from prison after being separated from society for a long period of time. Johan, you are often meeting inmates who have spent a long time apart from society. Do you think physical distance from society can also distance you mentally?
Absolutely. a physical distance will take you away from the society, your children. I remember one prison, a large prison far away from Oslo, where I could see beautiful trees. I could see a beautiful wall, a concrete wall, and of course my mind is traveling far away from where I really belong. And I belong to my family, I belong to my children. I need to be close to them, and having both physical and psychological or mental distance is the same.
Elli, do you have any thoughts on this?
I think you answered it very well. I recognize what you say. One example I have from an inhabitant of Elevator, which made quite an impression on me, was that he told me that when he sleeps at night, in the first weeks he was in prison, he was still dreaming about home, his children, his family. And then after a while, as the weeks go, he starts to dream about prison and only what happens within the walls. And I think it's a good example because it illustrates how the walls are not only physical, but also limit you mentally. And I think this is something that relatives also can pick up on, like the victims that the society does not see that obvious, that might be punished by losing one of their closest family members to the prison. And this is, I mean, the relationship between the prisoners and the family has such a big potential. So when it goes wrong, everything can go wrong. We heard stories about that. And when it goes well, it is a very great, it contributes very well to reintegration into society. This is why Salvation Army has a project called Mellom oss, which is translated between us, where they only work with network and relatives to use this potential in a positive way.
We know that inmates struggle with various issues already upon entry, such as drug addiction and mental health issues. Anna, how do you think it affects someone who is already struggling to be imprisoned in an institution far away from everything?
Like, penalty is the hardest form of reaction we have from society, and it has the intention and purpose of being the hardest reaction in itself. And we know it hurts and it harms people. We know that punishment in itself has a lot of consequences for people, and that contact with the justice system has exclusionary effects rather than inclusive, especially for youth or for young people. So just being like in short terms in contact with the justice system has a stigmatizing effect that keeps you further away than rather being included.
And how does this in turn affect their return to society, you think?
Yeah, as I said, I think it has the opposite effect. Yep. It excludes rather than inclusion, and so I would say that punishment in itself has kind of an ejecting force away from the general society.
One argument for building large prisons in rural areas is their cost effectiveness. Elli, what do you think about the fact that cost effectiveness has become the main priority when building and operating new prisons?
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with cost effectiveness. It sounds great. And I know that there's cheap ways of serving sentences, like, for instance, serving sentences at home, which the correctional service has used more and more in the latest years. The consequences of this is that we see a change in the prison population. We see that the nature of crime is more, it's harder crimes, it's more violent, and more individuals that are convicted of sexual offenses. Something that we also see more and more in Elevator, because in the end of the sentence sometimes they come to our institution, and often those prisoners struggle with their social skills. So having a small-scale facility with social workers that can follow up closely makes it possible to do social training with employees, with other inhabitants, or with NGOs like Wayback, or slowly then reconnect with family members. Anyway, the cheapest way of serving a sentence is to not serve a sentence at all. So I think it is very cost effective to invest in prevention.
Johan, what is a cost-effective prison to you, and what do you think it means to our government?
Well, in my opinion, cost-effective is what is effective to the society, and not to how to build a prison. We have to look at the total costs of having criminals or not investing in prevention. I believe that we politicians today are not able to see the total costs of having children not growing up with one or two parents, in the absence of their parents, the society around them, their friends, the stigma for the children that they have a mother or a father in prison. And also I believe that when you have smaller detention units, you have a better cooperation with the employees of the prison as well, because you feel responsible to behave both ways, both between the inmates as well as the employees of the prison. It's a closer society, and I believe you can succeed far more. So the total cost of the society is not the building of the prison.
One of the values of the Norwegian Correctional Service is transparency. Yet prisons are sent out in the woods, out of sight, out of mind. What signal do you think that sends to the general population, Anna?
I'm not an architect, but we build with intention of telling people something, and we have examples with urban spaces where we have seen benches who are built not for homeless people to be able to sleep on them, telling them not to be there, like be a part of the urban spaces. And when we enter the courthouse here in Oslo, for example, if you have entered those doors, they are really high and they're really tall, and it has the intention, I think, to tell you that you are small and you are now in contact with power, and you are, I feel, powerless with those kind of buildings. So similarly, large prisons with walls and closed doors tell us about danger, and that we should be scared of the people inside behind those walls, I guess.
Earlier on, we had a look at flight photos from the two newest prisons in Norway. This is a close-up of the new Agder prison, Magndal department. The meeting with society is non-existent. The outside of the prison is an unattractive place to be, and the inmates have no contact with normal life. What if we think differently about size and location? This is an illustration of how a detention facility, according to Rescale's vision, could look like. A rescaled detention house, where parts of the unit are in direct contact with the locals. This is a lower security facility located in a city context. It would look different if located, for example, in a smaller village. The point is that the facility is adapted to the community and the people who are incarcerated there. What impact do you think it can have to build detention facilities that blends in with the local architecture as opposed to building large and intimidating prisons, Johan?
I think it does something with all of us. It does something with the people outside the prisons. The building blends in. The buildings are not excluded. It's like the prisons we used to have in Norway 150 years ago. They were in the city center. They were the inmates. They were like a part of the society. Now, with the walls, we exclude the inmates from the society, and it works both ways. That you are excluded from the society, and the society is excluded from the people behind the walls. And in Norway, we have the principle of normality, that you can go to work. Yes, we can go to work in some of the prisons we have, but we walk from an anonymous building to another anonymous building. It doesn't have a soul. In the picture you just showed us, you can see that the buildings have a soul, and you can feel that you will... I think really that you will behave differently when you are surrounded with softer walls and flowers and yeah.
Anna, do you think such a design and transparency could have any effect on prejudices when it comes to inmates?
Yeah, it would surely make the whole thing a more part of the local community in itself, and we know that like belonging to the community has an impact on recovering and making changes for the better in your life, and the sense of belonging has a better impact than being forced away, I guess. And belonging is such a big part of everyone's lives that it's just something we can feel, all of us. Like having to be forced into large buildings in the middle of nowhere, it makes no sense, actually.
In the examples shown, the inmates sell self-produced organic goods like honey, eggs and vegetables, and are in this sense positive contributors to the community. In what other ways can the detention facility contribute positively to its community, do you think, Johan?
You could have a workshop, you can have people coming to do shopping in the prison. And I know from Norway, where we have greenhouses, even from high security prison, that even elderly people, they go there and they tell me that I met some nice inmates. So it has a really nice and good and meaningful contribution to the community, and it's supposed to serve both ways. That I, as an inmate, can feel that I have a belonging to the society. I can do something positive to the society, as well as the other way around, as the society can get something from us. Mm.
Any thoughts, Anna?
I heard Elli tell something about a prison in Germany where they were running a restaurant and where people were learning how to run a restaurant, and the community coming there to eat. But I don't know if I have any more ideas. But when we build services, and I have been working in social services for several years, we often happens to create similar system for very different people. Because when we first define a group out of society, we seem to think that they are equal to each other and not to the rest of us or something. So seeing the diversity here in both the ones who are in prison, but also the community, and what kind of resources they can bring into building something together, I think that would be kind of challenging, but I think that would be more energy in doing something that is built on the local resources. So not one size fits all, as we always do in Norway when we build social services. It's always like manually based. Like if we know that something works in one community, we put it in the next one as well.
Mm-hmm. Johan, how important is it to feel like a part of society?
It is very important, because in my opinion, sometimes we talk too much about the sentence itself. We forget that we need to be reintegrated to the society. That's why it's so important, because it's the person I'm going to be when I'm being released, which really has a value, both to the society, to me, my family, and everybody around me. So to make sure that I'm not returning to prison, and that I'm out of crime, and that if you reintegrate the prison, you also reintegrate the inmates to the society. And that's the philosophy we have in Rescaled, the reintegration.
What do you think it would mean to return to society as a part of the community, as opposed to standing outside a rural prison with all your belongings in a plastic bag, Elli?
Well, I think you answer your question yourself by putting in that way. I mean, on one hand, you are part of a community. You're part of something, and on the other hand, you are not. You're isolated. And we sometimes get prisoners from high security prisons, and we have experienced that they wish to be transferred back to the high security prisons after being at Elevator for 2 days. Even though Elevator is very structured, we have strict rules and routines, it's overwhelming and very confusing. So just imagine how difficult it must be to do this all by yourself. Sometimes we need up to 1 year to get everything prepared. If someone has done a really long sentence, to get everything prepared for the day they get released. And to imagine this person doing this all by themselves the first day and their freedom is, tough.
Would it be easier to plan a release from a rescaled facility, Johan?
Absolutely. I remember from my own sentence, 2 hours away from where I used to live, and I invited for 2 years the social service to come and see me, and they never came because it was too far away. And so they said, okay, we'll meet up when you are released. And we all know that that's too late. If you have a rescaled detention unit close to the society and the people whom you're going, the public services, you are able to meet with them. You are able to meet with the people whom you are going to have a relationship to after your release. Today, yes, we have good people inside the prison. We have social workers, we have doctors, we have everything. But they are not the same whom I'm having a relationship to after my release. So it's important to start that work during your sentence, so you get familiar with them and that trust.
Elli, you work in a small-scale facility that's located in Oslo. How important do you think the small scale and central location is for the reintegration of the inmates that are at your facility?
Well, my experience is that it is very positive that we are located in Oslo, as Johan said also in the beginning, and is that this is where the public health service is, this is where the social services is, this is where work is, this is where you might want to live and you can find your housing before you get released, and this is where your family might be. Another advantage that we have experienced at Lothe is that even though your friends and family might not be from Oslo, Oslo is sometimes easier to access than other prisons that are located in the middle of the woods, even though the distance might be further, because Oslo is the center, you have bus, you have flights, you have train. So what we think would be a good idea is to have a free housing for those family and friends, to be able to visit their relatives that are doing their sentence in the city sentence, in all big city centers.
Johan, you have been imprisoned in a small and central prison. What do you think? And is there anything that's better with a larger facility?
Well, not really. I can't actually think of anything which is better in a bigger prison. It could be that if I have a problem with another inmate, that can be transferred to another department. But I rather prefer to be transferred to another small detention unit in the same city. But I think it's important that I dream of small detention units all over the country. Because the public service is so important that it's close to and my relatives. So not even what the capital, which has everything, but we live in Norway. We live all over the country, not only in the big cities.
Anna, what do you see as the pros and cons of designing detention facilities this way when it comes to cooperation with the municipality and other service providers?
I would say they have said a lot here, but I have collaborated mostly with people who have been in large facilities, and there are often large bureaucratic institutions, and also the systems where I have worked in social services are built in the same manner, with little individual adaptation with the help you're giving. So I think that the advantage with smaller facilities in general can be that you can adapt it more to the individual and not be like these large systems who are not talking to each other, because it often is like NAV on the one side, like the social services, and large prisons on the other side, and just like the collaboration between those two are almost impossible at some point.
Do you think rescaled facility would be more likely to facilitate safe returns to society?
Yeah, I think because we know from research on recovery and getting help, it's like the local community-based help which creates belonging, creates a sense of meaning, is working with your network that affects people's comprehensions of being part of something. And it also affects people's gaining hope for a better life. And for all of us, hope is like the most important ingredients in seeing something for yourself in the future. So I think if we can work on recovering spaces, both in the community and in prisons, that would be like cost effective, if you can call it that.
Elli, what positive sides for employees do you see regarding developing detention facilities in the rescaled way?
Or maybe catch up the word that you have this hope. I think it is really motivating to following up prisoners and their processes, and that also closely, like being able to do that closely, and that also establish a good relationship, which my experience is for my staff that is more fun to work with, and it's more productive to actually, we talked about trust earlier today, how important it is to have a trust relationship between the people that are helping and the prisoners. And I also think it gives them better results. Another point that is important for me, from my perspective, is that it also creates a safer work environment around the employees.
Are there any negatives for the employees?
Well, I think as a social worker is always a difficult balance between the wish of helping on one hand and being consequent, strict, and setting borders on the other hand. And that gets more difficult as more equal the relation becomes, I guess. But from my experience in managing the stuff at Elevator, I think we have good results because we have high professional, competent staff, which makes it possible to be good at this balance, and also being aware of having a good work environment, I think is important.
Johan, the rescaled facility might be better for the inmates, but can it actually be beneficial for the local community too?
Yes, I think so. I have an example from a small detention unit in Oslo, where we took part in helping the other people living there, mowing the grass,
Dugnad,
cleaning
as we
up.
call it in Norwegian.
The Dugnad word, yes, where we all work together. And we were actually all on the internal TV, the inmates, and they were very proud of having us there. So I think we have this not in my backyard, but it really shows that when you finally locate a small detention unit in the society, in the small community, it really works, and we have proven that it works. They are happy, and we have something to offer. And if you look at crime, for example, all the crime is committed outside the prison. It's not inside the prison, and probably the area where we have the small detention units are the safest areas in Norway.
What about society at large, Anna-Sabina?
Like, even though we know that punishment hurts, we also know that those we punish, they are going back to the society and are going to be our neighbors and friends and everything. So it benefits everyone that we work as best as we can in this area. And one of the things I think that happens when you stigmatize someone or make something taboo is that we think that it only applies to people that we don't know, and we don't see it as our neighbors. But there are people we have around us all the time. So I think we are all best served by having as many people feel as part of the larger society as opposed to being left outside. So what we do in the times that we punish people has a large impact on how it goes afterwards, I think.
Johan, what do you think about the benefits for the society at large with the rescaled model?
I think I'm returning to the cost for the society and the personal cost as well on an individual basis. All together we need to add up the personal cost, the cost of the prison, running the prison, as well as the society, the cost of the society. It's so important from a human point of view as well that we respect every human, and it's worth having to be able to reintegrate everybody so we can live in a good society, and that we belong to the society, have a feeling of the belonging is important.
Elli, do you have any thoughts about the effects?
Nothing to add.
We still have a lot of time, so I guess we'll be rounding off then. The panel seems to agree that smaller detention facilities located in more central areas are optimal for both inmates, employees, and the society. But do you think that Norway is ready and open for shifting back to the idea of small detention facilities with the new elements that Rescaled focuses on, Anna?
Actually, I lived in the United States for a while, and when I was there, they were always talking about the Norwegian prison system, and so for me it was kind of like, okay, so we have been going back in time. So are the Norwegian people ready to understand that we now have the large facilities and that we have built down like the better, smaller ones actually? Because we have been traveling around the world, and this has been our pride, that we did something different, but now we're going backwards. So yes, I think we're ready because we have been ready before.
Elli, are we ready?
Well, I also think it's a political question, and I'm German, so I cannot vote, so I can just encourage everyone out there. I sometimes surprised how little the politicians actually talk about the correctional service. So I can just encourage everyone to read yourself up to what they think, because I've heard rumors that there is some political parties that are more positive to a model like that than other political parties.
Your vote should be cast regardless of your past. Do you think we're ready for shifting back, Johan?
I like to use the word hope, which we in Wayback use over and over again. But I think this it's high time to convince the politicians, and the correctional units, the correctional system, it's in waves as the rest of the society, and I believe it's time now to change how we look at prisons and criminals, and how we can reintegrate in the society. Now there's a chance to have a new government, whether it's the same government or the new one. I think it's our job to convince the politicians and make this important, to make them understand that this really brings value to everyone.
Well, I guess I'll say thank you to our panel, Anna-Sabina Soggiu, Elli Graf, Johan Lothe. We hope you enjoyed and learned something from our little talk. My name is Simen Iskariot Larsen, and I wish you a good evening.